भारत का अनकहा इतिहास की सीरीज में आप सबका स्वागत है। जैसा कि आप सबको पता है कि आज हमारा विषय है भारत को तोड़ने वाली आंतरिक शक्तियां। इसके बारे में हम सबसे विचार रखने के लिए श्री जय भट्टाचार्य जी हम लोग के साथ में जुड़े हैं। मैं निवेदन करूंगा श्री आर.एस. डालमिया जी से कि वो मंच को अपने वक्तव्य से आज की चर्चा को शुरू करें। श्री आर.एस. डालमिया जी।
थैंक यू दीपक। फ्रेंड्स, दोस्तों, आज का जो विषय है बहुत 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 ही इम्पोर्टेंट विषय है हमारे राष्ट्र के लिए, हमारे देश के लिए और उसकी रक्षा के लिए। Why I am saying this is that there are forces which are there trying to break our country, are trying to break our Rashtra. There are external forces, and we know who they are. We know it is China, we know it is Pakistan, and we know that we can fight them on the border. But there are so many internal forces within India, which our J. Bhattacharya sir will explain. And these are very, very difficult to fight with. And unless we realize what these forces are, unless we realize how they are breaking our country, we will not be able to fight them. It is very important that we know what these forces are. It is very important how they are breaking our country, these forces. Only then we can find a way to contain them or maybe finish them. It's a very, very important subject. And I remember one of the girl students asked this sometime in April, that we must talk about such breaking India forces. She talked about JNU and AMU and Jamia Millia, but basically this means the entire gamut of breaking India forces. So it's a very, very important subject, and which is never discussed in the textbooks, in the schools, in the colleges, and not even in the media. That is why it is becoming a very, very important subject. I want to introduce Mr. J. Bhattacharya, who is the speaker today. He is a specialist in corporate law and finance, and he has worked in large number of Indian industrial groups and financial institutions. He has written extensively in national and international media on socio-political issues, Indian history and civilization, as well as business affairs. Now, question is, this background, how is he qualified to talk about these breaking India forces? Let me remind you, he has written many blogs and from very, very long time on India, current affairs, and what is happening in our country. And for writing those blogs, he has done an extensive research and extensive reading. That is why he is very much qualified. He has taught in IIT Delhi. He taught economics, and I was his student. My class was his first student class, and I still revere him as my teacher, and therefore I always call him sir. So, sir.
My greetings to all the my friends and comrades who have joined, associates. My thanks to Raghu, whom I have known since 1968. His generous introduction, I will not forget. He has always been so generous, kind, and considerate. I had the pleasure also, he didn't mention, of working for 5 years for his Pujya elder brother, the chairman of the Dalmia Group, Vishnu Hariji, the late Vishnu Hariji. At that time, Raghu was in the plant in Rajgangpur. Anyway, so if, with the permission of the my group, we can start off. India, that is Bharat, is possibly the world's oldest continuing civilization. Now, the Chinese may say that theirs is the oldest. The Arab countries as is usual with their claims, they occasionally come into the international arena and talk about the Arab civilization. But in reality, the Greek contribution to humanity just preceded ours. So when we talk about India, Bharat, it is not just a geographical entity. It is a way of life. It is a civilization. It is a thought process. It is much more than that. It's a combination of factors which contribute to our Bharatiya society. Now, if you look at, I will not spend too much time in our planning process before I come to the main issue. We have contributed to science, technology, engineering, arts, philosophy, and literature. If you look at the Ram Setu, it's possibly, and Raghu is an engineer, and some of you are engineers and scientists, it's inconceivable how any society could have built that type of structure at that time. So we have to hold our head high. We unfortunately, and I'll come to this issue later on, 700 odd years of Mughal rule and then followed by British rule, we have been deliberately taught not to remember our glorious past. Now, Bharat extended its influence on the world not through military methods. We must remember that. Our influence in Southeast Asia and East Asia, whether it is Thailand, whether it is Burma, whether it is Indonesia, whether it is China, whether it is Korea, whether it is Japan, India's sway over this part of the world was not by conquest. It was by the world of ideas. Religion, of course, is important. Buddhism was the primary force. But if you look at the history of the Cholas, the Hindus also were very important in spreading Indian culture in East Asia and Southeast Asia. Korea, the Princess of Ayodhya, we all know that, how Buddhism went to Korea. And this is one thing which the Chinese will never admit. Their basic culture and civilization they owe to us. So let us, when next time they talk about this thing, let us not be defensive. Japan has always admitted the influence of India, the influence of Buddhism. But somehow we fell to foreign invasion. Well, they started with the Arab invasion of Sindh. There are many factors, from treachery, internal subversion, the generosity of our generals, our fighters, our leaders, in treating their opponents when they were defeated. We are all aware of that. How many times did Prithviraj Chauhan defeat our invading Muslim friend? But somewhere we fell to these forces. And then we had a Muslim rule which our children and our textbooks do not talk about. It was one of, but yet there are many foreign scholars, again from Greece, from France, from America, who have emphasized and underlined the most virulent genocide that has taken place in history is the genocide that took place in India. Now, this has caused a lot of problems. When we gained independence, 47, please let us remember that I refer to it as a transfer of power. It was independence in name to a very large extent. Gandhi and Nehru were not really interested in restoring India to its ancient glory. I call them the Gandhi-Nehru-Gandhi group. These people, this immediate post-47 regime till 2014, I would almost say, we were not allowed to remember our history and our culture and our civilization. Our textbooks, our children, our college students, our professors, there was a conspiracy. I'll use that word. I have no hesitation. Shadayantra, to keep this hidden from the younger generation, from the college students, from the PhD students. It is as if a few Mughal monuments, they constitute the backbone of Indian culture. This was a travesty. Anyway, I want to fast forward because Raghu and I, we decided, and Deepak ji, that today we should talk about the challenges that confront India. The challenges are manifold. They are social, they are political, they are legal, they are economic, and above all, they are existential. Now, I use this word very deliberately and very carefully. Existential threat to India exists in many forms. Raghu has outlined a few. Now, I would like to concentrate on what these threats are. These are not in any order of priority. The control of the mind. The control of the mind extends right from the school. What our children learn in the first 5 years of their middle school, then later on in senior school, they will remember that for the rest of their lives. And this is intellectual aggression. This is intellectual slavery that confronts us. Now, what can we do? This is intellectual aggression is one part. In addition to that, there are other elements of the Breaking India forces. They are now widely recognized as Breaking India forces. When somebody says Bharat ka tukra tukra karenge, he is not he or she. There are some ladies who are women also in that group, starting with people like Arundhati Ghosh and many others. We need not mention all of them. So when they talk about breaking India, they refer to the political disintegration of India, the intellectual destruction of the Indian mind, and ultimately giving way to international forces to take over our country. So we will be back to the Mughal British period. That is what these people want. Now, as my friends say, and I have a number of friends in the armed forces, the Indian armed forces can tackle our enemies. It is the unknown enemy in your house, in the garden, lurking behind our front doors. That is what the danger is. The Indian armed forces can take care of the Pakistanis, can take care. They've recently shown that 1962, Nehru's legacy of a defeated India, we have forgotten that. In Galwan, today, the world international security community, they have now studied it and they have admired the way our forces more than gave it back to the Chinese. You know, as far as the Pakistanis are concerned, I think it's a B team. I've never, I mean, when I was at the university in England and there's a Pakistanis who would talk, you know, particularly the Punjabi Pakistanis, who would say, "Arey bhai, we will take care of you people. Arey tum to Bengali ho." This was the type of mental and psychological warfare that they waged. I had a cousin, a very dear cousin of mine, who was in the Armored Corps, in the famous 20th Lancers. When he took 300 Pakistani prisoners, out of which 25 were officers, they didn't know that he was a Bengali. So they kept on saying, "Arey bhai, hum to Punjabi hain, aap log kya karte ho, kyun hamare se ladte ho? You know, we can take care of the Bengalis in East Pakistan here. Well, tum log kyun Bharat, you Indian log kyun aaye ho?" So my cousin had to tell them that, "Look, I am also a Bengali." And the Punjabi Marshal, Punjabi Mussalman, let's be very clear, the British used to call them the PM, the Punjabi Mussalman regiments. So that type of aggression we have taken care of. 48, 65, Kargil, 71, before that. The largest surrender of military personnel after the Battle of Stalingrad was in Dhaka. So we have taken care of that. But what are the internal forces? The army is not meant to look into that. That is a job for the civilian administration. That is a job for every Indian citizen, not just the IB and the RAW and you know, the other establishments, the paramilitary forces. No, the responsibility of guarding our internal frontiers is a job of every Indian citizen. Now, where are the threats? The threats, my dear friends and associates today, come from the world of academia, academics. They come from the media. They come from the schools and colleges where the forces, breaking India forces, they have a clear agenda of destroying the minds of the next generation. If you have done that, as the Greeks said, the enemy within, you know, the enemy outside, you can tackle, as we have just discussed, but the enemy within, how do you identify them? Identification is relatively easy because they're so blatant. We know who they are. How do you neutralize them? And as Raghu used the word, how do we take care of them permanently? Now, let's look at the world of academia. From 1947, the Indian Council of Historical Research and the NCERT, which is in charge of designing the books for children. We have discussed how important the young mind is. The young mind, the books that are taught to youngsters are all approved by the NCERT. And for 55 years, this NCERT and ICHR, they were the preserve. They were the backyard of the anti-national gang. And how? If you look at the history books.
Sir, who was this anti-national gang? You might like to elaborate a little. Who was this anti-national gang?
Anti-national gangs, Raghu just now said, they are in the press. They were in academia extremely influential. They are also in the government. They have been in the government, in the previous governments. And there were many civil servants who were, loyalties were to one family. They were not to the country. They were not to the constitution. The academic world was even more nefarious, When you look at people like Romila Thapar, I mean, she became a professor of ancient Indian history in Delhi University, in JNU, without knowing 2 sentences of Sanskrit. This is a proven matter. This is not a matter of speculation. Romila Thapar, I once asked her, that would you be able to translate or understand the basic Upanishadic prayers? Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamaso Majo. She was speechless. This is in front of others. There were 2 ambassadors alongside me. So you have that type of academia. There are people who were in the Ayodhya case before the Allahabad High Court and in the Supreme Court. There were historians who were totally in charge of giving a biased report to the 2 courts. Ultimately, the Allahabad High Court identified them and they said there was one, and he happened to be a Muslim archaeologist. He was the one who verified the presence of remains below the Ayodhya temple, the mosques below the mosque. And he said that these were at least 1,000 years old. But the rest of the Archaeological Survey of India, for many decades, this is the government now. So academia, government, I would say to some extent,
was basically the leftist forces, the communist forces.
Yes, up to a point there. But Raghu, I will not make the mistake of saying that all communists, some were very nationalists also. They were among the communists, a minority. But the basic, the anti-Indian forces are the ones who were westernized, educated in England, particularly. I was educated in England, but I mean, I would never dream of betraying my country. But this was that class. Romila Thapar was educated in England, and a whole bunch of them. Khushwant Singh, Arundhati Ghosh. So, in the world of academia, among historians, I mean, if I start naming them, we'll spend the rest of the afternoon. So maybe we should just identify their mental characteristics rather than identifying them individually. A lot of us, and later on, if there are specific questions, you and I can identify them individually. Press. Now, the press is something. The Hindu newspaper, which is called the Hindu, cannot possibly be more colonial and Mughal in its perspective. There are other papers. The Times of India, which was at one time, Raghu, owned by your family, which is now, of course, not with. The Indian Express, founded by a great patriot, is now in the hands of people who were employees of the late Ramnathji. Ramnathji must be dying 1,000 deaths, the editorial policy. There is a Statesman now. One can understand the Statesman. It was a British newspaper, which was then taken over by the Indians. And you had a number of very highly anglicized Indians who didn't even speak any language, Indian languages. But why should the press, the vernacular press, Hindi press, large segments of the Hindi press are also very, quote unquote, internationally oriented, which is a polite way of saying that they do not subscribe to the national agenda. So you have the press, you have academia, you have government servants who ICS, we can understand they were trained to be nokars. Well, we have a very favorite term in Bangla, which is called chakur bakur. In Hindi, you would call it nokar chakar. Now, these were all the nokar chakars. Then government, the judiciary, the old barristers who came back and became for years the moving forces of the Indian high, at least the superior courts, their mental attitude was the same as the Romila Thapars of the world, the Arundhati Ghoshs of the world. Some of their judgments from 47 onwards, or let's say after the constitution was framed, some of their judgments are mind-boggling. Now, how can we criticize them without fear of contempt of court? There is a genuine problem there of the judiciary, senior judiciary, being so susceptible to any form of criticism. Now, of course, the class composition of the Indian judiciary has changed. From British barristers, many of the senior legal people are American trained. So you have 5 or 6 of these elements which we have just now identified. These are the part of the security threat, the enemy within. The famous Trojan horses. You're all aware of Greek history. So here also we have these 4 or 5 elements. When the Jamia Millia people started their Shaheen Bagh movement, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, did not control them. They appointed a committee to go into it. How the whole of South Delhi, entry to South Delhi, the capital of the country, was blocked for months on end. And what did the Supreme Court do? They appointed very prominent secularist-oriented public figures, including retired government servants, to identify another spot. Now, how can public thoroughfares, this is a fundamental rule of law in this country, fundamental law, there are any amount of legislations. You cannot hinder public movement. You cannot stop people from freely using the public highways, the entry points into Delhi. From one part of Delhi to another, people would have to take during the Shaheen Bagh movement, people had to take a detour of 10 miles, 11 miles, and our judiciary did nothing. So this is a type of, we are in a very, as we call it, the cusp. It's a very popular term. We're at a cusp. Bharat. We either survive as a proud, independent, confident, secure nation, or we go on for the next 20 years. The younger generation may be there, Raghu and I won't. For the next 20 years, we'll live in an atmosphere of insecurity, atmosphere of jeopardy. Sometimes it's double jeopardy because you don't know what they will do next. If the call from one of the places of worship says, block the roads, they'll block the roads, they'll block the railways. So
what place of worship are you talking about, sir?
Well, I would definitely be frank enough, Raghu, I've never shied away. My articles have all said it. These are the masjids. The churches are very much, the churches are not, they don't, to a very large extent, the churches, except in Kerala, some individual bishops have made incendiary speeches, but by and large, the churches have not been incendiary, quote unquote. The call for unrest, the calls, plural, come from the minarets, come from the masjids, come from...
Can we use the word jihad for this, sir?
Beg your pardon?
Can we use the word jihad?
I have no hesitation. I have no hesitation that these are calls for jihad, saying that these are calls for jihad. Every morning when in our area, many years ago, there was a mosque which would blare their prayer. Ultimately, when we didn't have to go to the High Court on others, we ourselves took, senior people took this, asked them to control this. But there are parts of, in Calcutta, Raghu, the land of, not my forefathers didn't come from Calcutta, they came from East Bengal, Bangladesh, but we grew up in Calcutta, I did my college in Calcutta. There are parts of Calcutta where from 5 o'clock people can't sleep. And these were parts where the Bhadralok lived, you know, the middle class, upper middle class people lived. Now, the strategy is very clear. You build one place of worship, and then they multiply. This is something. There are umpteen number of High Court judgments saying that you cannot have the loudspeaker above so many decibels. But these judgments are hilarious. No one observes them. But on top of that, there are places like the seminary, Deoband, Raghu, you're aware of them. Which
in Rajasthan, I heard that there is a restriction on loudspeakers for the temples.
Yes.
But there is no restriction on loudspeaker
from the mosques.
Yes,
that
sir.
restriction on the loudspeakers on temples was introduced only a few weeks ago under not all that new, but the relatively new Rajasthan government. So, Indian secularism, and I have to go back to it, our constitution was wrongly drafted. You cannot have this type of fake secularism. Either you say that the state will stay completely away from this. You cannot have minority scholarships. You cannot have the morning prayers disturbing everyone's sleep. You cannot have them. Until 5 years ago, there used to be a particular ceremony where it was called, I don't exactly remember the Urdu word. They would come on motorcycles from Jama Masjid area right up to India Gate and use their motorcycles for trick driving. You know, in the history of Islam, the horses have a very prominent place, and this is a use of the motorcycle as a replacement for the horses. This is an open challenge to. They would come all the way from Jama Masjid to the Green Park Masjid, all the way, stopping all traffic. And the Indian state, the Delhi state, would allow them a free rein and stop other traffic. Please remember, I've been stopped many number of times. And fortunately, that this has been controlled recently. But very often, you will have interpretations of the holy book from places like Deoband. Deoband will issue a diktat, as we used to call it, the German word, saying that this is now our position about a particular aspect of Islamic law and life. And then this becomes, for every follower of that faith, it becomes obligatory. Some may not follow it as scrupulously as the Deoband people would like them to be followed. But we do not have any other faith in the world which does this in a minority country. Now you can imagine the land of my forefathers, my friends in this thing, we come from East Bengal. I went on a World Bank mission in 2003. The Hindu population was 27% is down to 8%. And some Bhadralok Bangladeshis, intellectuals, who were genuinely sad, they said, Mr. Bhattacharya, I think even that 8% will no longer be there in another 20 years. So you have our faith being neutralized in our immediate neighborhood, forget about Pakistan. Pakistan is an openly. So is Bangladesh an official Islamic Republic. Let's not forget that. They had, under Mujib, it had become a secular this thing. They went back to it. And the Bangladesh Supreme Court 15 years ago said, no, we will not abolish the Islamic status of Bangladesh. It's only in India that we have this grand tamasha. I have no hesitation in using the word of secularism, where 80% of the population live under controls, whereas 20% of the population doesn't. So, and rest assured, among the 80% of the population, there are many of these so-called, I just identified them. I would say that the Hindi word tathakathit, Bangla mein is the same word, tathakotito, Buddhijivis. So 80% includes the anti-India forces also. The Indian Express, the Times of India, the print. Now the latest one is the print. They publish articles which are so outrageous and inaccurate, figments of imagination. They will interpret the Constitution, they will interpret anything in whatever manner they want. And the horror of horrors is the print is edited by an American citizen. That man, and the Press Act is very clear. You cannot have foreign citizens in charge of the Indian publications. There was also a rumor that N. Ram, his wife is certainly American. I don't know whether he's an American citizen. So we have all these problems which face us around. Deepak, we are in I use the word cusp. We are in a dangerous phase of Indian security apparatus. Our security environment is threatening. Our boys in blue, our boys are our olive green Army, Navy, Air Force, they can do whatever they want. The enemy within will always have an advantage.
Sir, would you like to tell us a little on how do we identify them and how do we contain them?
Now, identification, Raghu, is very easy. Identification, you know them.
Okay, so shall we say how do we contain them?
Yes, how do we contain them? It has to be at least a four-pronged approach. We have to contain them administratively, which is the easiest. Provided we have a government with the will, we can contain them administratively. We can contain them legally. For that, the judiciary has to be honest, the judiciary has to be transparent, and the judiciary has to be security conscious. They have to have a commitment. I do not use the word committed judiciary in the Indira Gandhi sense. Please don't get me wrong, because that's a very notorious term. But the judiciary has to be committed to our constitution. In principle, is one of the finest constitutions in the world. Can anybody tell me if what is wrong? Later on, the Gandhi, the second Gandhi started all the playing around with. Nehru also did. So there's nothing wrong with our constitution. Dr. Ambedkar was a visionary of the highest degree. And I must remind some of my viewers, there is a clip which is available on YouTube, and it's still not been banned, where Dr. Ambedkar says that I stopped referring to him as Mahatma. I have never referred to him as Mahatma after he did all the things that he... This is how can we call him Mahatma? This is Dr. Ambedkar, the finest legal mind this country has produced. And what does the Congress do? They address him as BR, Bhim Rao Ji, not Dr. Ambedkar. If you see all the Congress big shots, they have great hesitation in referring to him as Dr. Ambedkar. They'll say Bhim Rao ji. When it comes to in our house, Raghu, I'm honored to say my father stopped the use of the word father of the nation. I was very young and I learned it from him. So how can he be the father of the nation? So identification is easy, combating them we can do it. Administrative.
How we as citizens, forget the judiciary, forget the government, how we as citizens can fight them and contain them.
Ultimately, Raghu,
we are all 200 people sitting here, and we would like to know what we can do.
Raghu, ultimately every country, and this is what the Greeks taught us, and which our forefathers, they think in our books, the Raja and the Praja were together. A good Raja was never isolated away and moved away. So as citizens, it is our equal duty as our administrators. If we, and it's a very valid question, if we don't do it, then the government will also, our politicians will also play tricks. Every one of us has to do it. It must start. I'm proud to say, Raghu, knowing our relationship, my relationship with you, is a family. If it doesn't start at the family level, it doesn't go anywhere else. Parents have to take responsibility. आप तो Jack and Jill went up the hill पढ़ाते हो, हाँ? Ask how many children, even in government schools in Delhi, know the national song, not the national anthem, the national song, the second para. बताइए उनको पढ़ के मुझे बताएंगे वो. वंदे मातरम के they are totally divorced from, even in municipal schools. So we all have a duty, our group, starting the people who are in this audience today, we may not meet, but if we all in public, we say that yes, India is eternal. India is not something which is your United States or Britain or something, I have a great respect for France, but we are more intrinsic in our civilization than the Chinese and the Japanese. The Japanese will admit to you. I've dealt with the Japanese at various levels. And after a time, if they respect you, Raghu, you know that you worked in a company, in Dalmia's we had Japanese collaboration with Nomura. If they respected you, they would tell you after some time, after you've earned their respect, that they owe their culture to India, to the Shakyamuni. So we should not be defensive. Forget about the fact whether we went to missionary schools or not. घर आके हमें असदोमा सदगमा माँ के साथ पढ़ना पड़ता था. If we don't do that, parents, and we have gone past the age of being parents, but youngsters here for their children. So that is where you start. The government, they owe it to us, but we have to pressurize the government. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If you don't pressurize the government, then what will happen? So it is a multi-pronged approach I am advocating. General citizen, your own house, to the extent we can have the best of the West, best of the West. But what we have got is the worst of the West. Unka rejects, umko bhej diya. Rejects meaning from the intellectual world. So, a great French scholar, Sylvain Lévy, Professor Sylvain Lévy, Sorbonne, said, well, this is the cradle of civilization. Greeks, बाद में. Alexander took back many of the ideas from India. So I think the duty starts with ourselves. We must not be defensive. जो आप आदमी आपको कहेंगे, please respond to them politely, firmly, confidently, and honestly. What is wrong? I have no compunctions in telling my European white Gora friends, we were doing advanced mathematics and partial differentiation when you were on the treetop. ये भी कह चुका हूँ. Raghu will know what partial differentiation is. Calculus में. So we have to be confident, but confidence comes from within. Bravado se nahi hota. There is a difference between confidence and bravado. And we have enough people. Today there is a momentum. We can neutralize them. We can force our government, we can force our judiciary, we can force our industry. Some of them look at Titan. As an ex-Tata man, I wrote a very strong letter to Ratan Tata. Titan watches the advertisement campaign, which you remember, many of you will remember it last year. I said, what is this nonsense? I got a reply from Ratan Tata. You see, there are people, our allies are there. The point is coming up and taking the first step. Raghu, you have done that. Deepak has done it. I have done it. And the others have also done it. So let's keep up the momentum. That's all I will say.
सर बहुत बढ़िया बात बताई आपने. Friends, I hope you will remember when I was doing certain sessions on my own, I talked during the Gandhi session about his Muslim appeasement, which unfortunately became a legacy in our independent India. Nehru, he used to say that by education I'm an Englishman, by culture I'm a Muslim, and it is just by fate that I am born in a Hindu family. So the question only is, he admired English people, he admired Muslim people, he never admired Hindu people. So he never bothered about bringing out the glory of India and trying to take up that glory to different heights. Those of you who have read this book, his book, Discovery of India, in that book also, he never glorified the Indian history, never glorified the Hindu history or even the Indian history. The entire glorification was the Mughal history.
But Raghu, that was a third-rate book. So today it has been completely discredited.
So there has been a serial, there has been a TV serial on that Discovery of India. And then when we come to Indira Gandhi to assert her own power, to assimilate her own power, she used the communists and in turn gave them the entire education. And our entire education system, our education syllabus became the communist stronghold. And therefore, no glory of India. Only glory of Mughals and partly glory of Britishers. So the question now is, when we talk of this IAS examination, Mr. Bhattacharya talked about the Hindu newspaper. That is a out and out a communist newspaper. In the IAS examination, those who are doing those who take the classes for all the prospective students who want to give the IAS examination, they tell them, please read the Hindu, which means in the study process itself, the entire student community is groomed towards communism. And that becomes, in future, those who become the IAS officers, their entire system, their entire thought process becomes a communist thought process. I hope you have heard of this Vivek Agnihotri person. Vivek Agnihotri is a man who has produced this movie, Tashkent Files. If you have seen this movie, Tashkent Files. He has written a book, Urban Naxals. And he has also produced a movie on this. I'm not remembering the name of the movie. In that movie is based on the Urban Naxals book. He went to JNU to show that movie. He was booed out. He went to Jadavpur University to show that movie. He was booed out. Because these are communist strongholds, and the Urban Naxals book talks about these urban Naxals which Mr. Bhattacharya was talking about, the academia. Those academia is not the general academia. Those academia are the humanities department. Unfortunately, even in Jadavpur University, even in IIT Madras, this has penetrated. This is very, very unfortunate. Then in a technical institution, such a thing has got penetrated. Then we talk of these madrasas. I have many Muslim friends. The educated ones usually are the good ones. But the educated madrasa people, they are influenced by these Maulvis. They are influenced by these jihadis. And they are the people who actually do the jihad. And if they go to AMU, AMU is entirely Muslim. If they go to Jamia, the entire Shaheen Bagh is a product of that. So these are the internal forces which are now destroying the country. We have to realize, we have to recognize, and once we recognize them, we have to make up our mind how we can stop them, how we can contain them. The only way we can contain them is how we can strengthen the Hindu forces, and only then we will be able to contain them. So, sorry friends, I had to intervene here. It was not really had to intervene. I just wanted to make some comments, additional comments on what Mr. Bhattacharya told. I would like to invite Deepak to start the question answer session if there are any questions by the audience.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I have one question. When you call it Hindu, what is your definition of Hindu?
The definition of Hindu is very, very clear. It is not necessarily a Hindu religion. It is those who follow the Sanatan Dharma. It is those who follow the true secularism. Those who follow the true secularism. Because the Hindu religion, the Sanatan religion, is basically a secular religion. In this, we always say, Sarva Dharma Samabhava, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But if we see that, but others don't, then we are in trouble. Therefore, we say that, but if necessary, we have to get out of that.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is a question for Mr. Bhattacharya ji. Someone is asking that if there is a right-wing government since last 8 years, then why this government unable to contain these forces?
With due respect to the questioner, I do not consider this government to be a right wing or a left wing or a central wing. It is a more nationalist government than the only nationalist government we have had since. It's not right wing or left wing, or it's a question of a government which is committed to India. And when I say the only one, the Atal Bihari interlude was short. So he could barely, and he had allies. So this is the first in 2014 onwards, last 8 years. So let us forget the one question about the government being right-wing. Let's say the government is committed to India, committed to the notion of India. I kept on saying for the first 20 minutes is the concept of India. India is not a geographical entity. It is much more than that. So, you're the questioner. I would request him to not to use the word right-wing government. It's a nationalist government. Now, they inherited. I'm not defending them. If the questioner is there, he can maybe Deepak Bhai will allow him to ask directly. Now, they have inherited a terrible legacy. They have inherited a legacy on the administrative front, on the judicial front, on the economic front. So they are trying. I have been very critical privately with my friends. Sometimes they get angry with me. And I sympathize with them because there's so much of backlog to clear. And they have taken steps. The cancer. Now, I'm not a medical person, so I may be using, there may be doctors in the audience who may correct me. The cancer had come very much into the body politic. To uproot that cancer, there are various ways. One is the drastic surgery, cut off the arm. I mean, you can't do that in politics. So I'm not being defensive. I'm not trying to. There have been confusions also. Let us be very clear. Had a lot of intellectual confusion in many areas, in economics, even in national security. So to answer your question, yes, 8 years, I would have expected them to have done better.
So,
I will not be harsh on them.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is a question from Vandana Sunil. She is asking that kindly ask Mr. Bhattacharya ji to suggest alternative sources of reading, understanding the true history of India. हम नॉर्मल ये जो भी पढ़ा रहे हैं इसके अलावा क्या पढ़ सकते हैं सर, या यंगर जनरेशन क्या पढ़ सकती है अगर इनको कुछ समझना हो तो?
देखिए, भारतीय इतिहास की कई पुस्तक हैं, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम डॉक्टर आर.सी. मजूमदार एंड सो मेनी अदर्स. उनको अगर भारतीय विद्या भवन के लाइब्रेरी में भेज दीजिएगा, देयर आर एनफ बुक्स ऑन इंडियन हिस्ट्री व्हिच आर साइंटिफिक, credible. But they need to be, see, Dr. Majumdar's book is a highly sophisticated university level book. For our children, they start learning history at the age of 8 to 10, I think about 10, Indian history. A serious reinterpretation of the NCERT textbooks. The first thing is the NCERT textbook, and this is where our government has failed disastrously. 8 साल हो गया, 7 साल हो गया. The NCERT, you're aware, everyone is aware of what the NCERT is, right? The National Council for Educational Research and Training, they devise the textbooks for schools. NCERT has to come up with credible. I'm not saying that we accept everything which P.N. Oak comes up with. I mean, he was also a learned scholar, but some of his theories may not stand scrutiny. We need, and anyway, the children don't have to be exposed to controversial things. Teach them about the glories of India. Teach them about, Professor Nicholas Kazanas, बोल के Greek historian है, used to come to India very frequently. उनकी किताब on the Saraswati River, उसको ये करके make it simplified. Give it to the children. Let them learn. Aryan invasion theory को खत्म करो. It's very easy to demolish. ये जो 4-5 American women हैं, the Athene हैं, they look horrible, they speak horribly. The people who talk about the Aryan invasion theory, you know the names. Demolish their books, they're very easy. Up till now, 47 to 2020, our books have not been revised. You know what they call the Hindu period, the Muslim period? They can't call the British period Christian period, because so they have to call it British period. This is a level of history that is taught. So we need to revise our textbooks, have simplified versions of great authors, Dr. Mukherjee, Dr. R.C. Majumdar, Pendarkar. There are so many books. Raghu, Vishwa Hindu Parishad mein, library mein bhi, there are so many books, at least a few of them, if you can highlight in one of your programs next, which explains Indian history in a very logical, scientific manner. We can do that. Very good question.
मैं प्रश्नकर्ता को ये बता सकता हूँ कि अब अपने स्कूलों में, अपने जो 4 स्कूल हैं, चारों स्कूलों में जुलाई से भारत का सच्चा इतिहास, इसके बारे में बच्चों को क्लासेस में बताया जाएगा और ये पूरे साल सेशंस चलेंगे और हर साल ये सेशंस होंगे। तो पहली क्लास से या तीसरी क्लास से मेरे को याद नहीं है शुरू करेंगे और 8वीं तक अभी सोचा है, कोशिश करेंगे उसको आगे जाके 9वीं से 12वीं तक भी लेके जाएं और भारत का जो सच्चा इतिहास है उसके बारे में उनको बताया जाएगा। तो जिन्होंने प्रश्न पूछा है, अगर वो पेरेंट हैं तो आपको वैसे नॉलेज के लिए, अगर आप छात्रा हैं तो आपको पढ़ाया जाएगा इस चीज़ के लिए, तो यू डोंट हैव टू वरी अबाउट इट। और यहाँ पे सारे स्कूल के प्रिंसिपल्स आज प्रेजेंट भी हैं, कैप्टन पिल्लई कैन कंफर्म और बाकी जो प्रिंसिपल्स हैं वो भी कंफर्म कर सकते हैं दैट दिस इज द न्यू थिंग विच वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट इन आवर स्कूल्स नाउ।
सर, डीवीएम चिड़ावा के प्रिंसिपल सर आपसे मिस्टर भट्टाचार्य सर से कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं।
Thank you, Bhattacharya ji, for this wonderful enriching us. And what Judge Raghori sir is telling about, we have already planned for the syllabus and curriculum on the design. And as sir said rightly, from June onwards, our children are going to learn all these Indian culture, heritage, everything is planned. And under the guidance of sir and our CEO, ma'am, Dr. Rosetta Williams, already we have planned every schools, all the Dalmia group of schools, all the children are going to learn this, and we have planned it, sir. This is for your information, sir. I'm just sharing.
No, if Raghu can share the manuscripts electronically, I would be very happy to go through them.
So it's under process. It is under process.
Thank you, sir.
Very good.
Thank you, sir. समीर जकोरिया जी का एक सवाल है सर कि extreme nationalism or ultra nationalism word are often used in negative sense by the media nowadays. Sir, is ultra nationalism against the so-called secular fabric or texture of our country? ये ultra nationalism क्या हमारे देश के secular fabric के लिए नुकसानदायक है? भट्टाचार्य जी सर, आपसे ये सवाल है सर।
Secular fabric, भारतवर्ष का secular fabric से, भारतवर्ष by nature is secular. So secular fabric we don't have to worry about. We have taken in all ideas from the world. We have been the receptacle of ideas, except when these ideas have come in a colonial manner. That is the ones, those are the ideas we need to reject. But ultra-nationalism, Shabd, I am not very clear. Have we Indians invaded any other country?
Have we gone and ultra or extreme figure जो use किया है ना, these are only to negate the nationalism part of the media. We have been discussing.
I want to understand the question of my learned friend. अल्ट्रा नेशनलिज्म का कॉन्सेप्ट क्या है आपका मन में? भारत has never been ultra national. You start from Cambodia and come back to Afghanistan, where the Indian culture spread. This is a pan-Indian culture. Japan and China को छोड़ दीजिए. Korea, that includes Korea, it includes Vietnam, it includes Laos, includes Indonesia. Ultra national, we never conquered these people. Our ideas went and influenced them. Not our military. Not the Indian Navy, like the US Navy, chala gaya, USS America bhej diya Japan ki taraf. No, we didn't do that. Unlike the Spaniards who went to Latin America and destroyed Latin America. The Mayas and the Incas. Unki civilization also. This is another area of Raghu. I've been writing. Latin America, what the Spaniards did. Portugal's occupation of Goa was brutal, terrible, but they couldn't wipe out our ancient Indian way. But Latin America, they've almost finished off. So therefore, we have never done that. So the question is interesting, but I would not like to take it to this year. Ultra-nationalism has never been an Indian phenomenon.
जी सर. सर, कैप्टन पिल्लई कुछ सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं, कुछ कहना चाहते हैं.
Sir, what would be your say about Gandhi ji and Jawaharlal Nehru in our Indian history?
I would ask you to look at Dr. Ambedkar's clip. I'll send it to Raghu, and please hear it. He says, I have never called him Mahatma. This is one of the foremost legal experts India has produced. The father of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Rao. Bhimrao ji Ambedkar, जिनको कांग्रेस वालों ने जिनको भीमराव कहते हैं. I told you.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Ambedkar, वो clip Raghu, आप will you be able to send it to Captain Saab?
हाँ मैं भेज दूंगा सर WhatsApp पे भेज.
Link है. It's on WhatsApp. This is the problem that Nehru and Gandhi, you see, in the Nehru family, nobody has ever passed an university exam. You are aware of that. Nehru never got his degree in Cambridge. He got what is called a gentleman's pass. And I went to the university office. I was very young when I went to Cambridge. And everybody said, Nehru. The Cambridge University office will tell you that Nehru failed. And he was given what is called a gentleman's pass because he was from a public school. He was from Harrow. This is the difference between him and Netaji. Netaji's father was an equally famous barrister, but he put him in an Indian school. Nehru was sent from here to England to attend a British school. And from there, he got into Cambridge and he failed. So as a scholar, he was third rate. He could write English properly. That, some of our, even our government school boys in Delhi write English properly. So Nehru was a complete fraud. He was not a scholar. He was not a statesman. And as a politician, he was utterly dishonest. He wanted to become the prime minister at any cost. He gave away Kashmir. He was having an affair with Mountbatten's wife. He's a totally, thoroughly disgraceful fellow. So I wonder what you want to do. And as far as Mr. Gandhi is concerned, and I've also, like Dr. Ambedkar, I'm not in his league, but in our house, the term Mahatma was banned by my father. So we used to say Gandhi ji at times. My mother was very polite, typical Brahmo lady. Said, no, you can't say this about our senior. You must say Gandhi ji. So, but Mr. Gandhi was a total, I will not use strong language. He was not a nationalist in the true sense of the term. His objective was different. And now as more and more material is available on Gandhiji's track record, the Mopla Rebellion, this is, even the Pakistani scholars are saying that Gandhi's advocacy of the Mopla Rebellion, which led to some horrendous massacres. You from your part of the world. In those days, about 80,000 to 100,000 Hindus were butchered. So Gandhi, I'm sorry if that answers your question, but I will not rate him, give him even a beta minus. He'll probably gamma plus. I mean ranking, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. You know the rankings.
कैप्टन आप मेरे 2 एपिसोड देखिएगा, मेरे YouTube पे मिल जाएंगे, one on Gandhi, one on Nehru. So you will get a fair idea of what they did.
ये पुस्तक आपने रघु मुझे नहीं दिया आपने?
सर YouTube पे है, मेरी YouTube चैनल पे आप
अच्छा, but are you planning to bring it in print form?
सर टाइम लगेगा अभी प्रिंट फॉर्म में लाने के लिए. मेरा मन है प्रिंट फॉर्म में लाने के लिए, लेकिन इट्स गोइंग टू टेक अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम बिकॉज आई एम कलेक्टिंग ऑल द आर्टिकल्स. Whatever Zoom we do, all these sessions are transcribed and then they will be put in the form of a. So once it becomes a reasonable number, then we will put it in the form of a book.
So basically, as rightly stated by sir, we are actually in the process of, actually we are nearly completed. 99.9% we have completed the Bharat Nirman curriculum, which actually Raghuvari Dalmia ji has started it, and under the guidance of our CEO ma'am, with the support of our Miss Veena ma'am and the team of teachers, we have prepared a total curriculum for our children so that they get a very clear history of what our India is, who had been working for the betterment of India. So a total open history of India would be in the presence of our children from from nursery till grade 8 as of now, just like how sir has told, and gradually we'll move it down to 12th also, sir, from 9 to 12. It's ready, sir. Actually, sir, it is ready. It has been sent down to CO ma'am and HO office. They are going through it, and it will be put to you in book format, sir.
Send it to me also.
Sir, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Shri R.S. Dalmia ji to show his vote of thanks to Mr. Jay Bhattacharya ji and guide us for future activity or future course of action.
Friends,
Shri R.S. Dalmia ji.
Thank you, Deepak. Friends, it is very, very important to understand and remember our slogan, Mera Desh, Meri Zimmedari, Meri Sanskriti, Mera Abhiman. So today's session was basically to make everyone feel that it is my country and it is my responsibility to maintain the goodness of that country. So we must remember this. I would like to thank Shri Jay Bhattacharya ji sir for giving us so much time. He has spent a lot of time in preparation. Our session is only, say, today now 1.5 hours, but he has spent I don't know how many hours preparing for the session because I requested him to talk about this, and I would like to thank on behalf of all the participants and myself that you have given us a wonderful talk, a wonderful knowledge, a wonderful ideas to even think about it in future. And I would just like to remind everyone, our next 2 sessions are on Bharat ke Yuddh. The next one is on the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. And after that, that is 13th June. And on 20th June, it is going to be on Kargil War. And as usual, Lieutenant General Rameshwar Yadav ji, he will be talking about both these wars on 13th as well as on 20th. I would like all of you to please join in large numbers and give us, to make us enthusiastic about the whole thing. And we will be very happy to see you at 4:30 next Sunday, 13th of June. Look forward. Jai Hind, friends. Jai Hind, mere dosto.
Thank you, sir.
Vande Mataram.
वंदे मातरम सर।